So, John, thanks very much for agreeing to talk to me this morning. We're talking about the impact of the Bible and how we engage with it as the Iona community. You've been a member of the Iona community, I don't know for how many decades, a good number, you can tell us. And you've been a resource worker with the Wild Goose Resource Group for a very long time. Um, can you say a little bit about the resource group for those who don't know much about it? What is it you get up to?
Well, it's really a group of three people, used to be four, three people, and our priority is enabling folk to develop new patterns of worship. When we began, it was a lot to do with music, and we produced quite a lot of songs. But gradually it became, important to us to find ways in which particularly lay people could engage both in leading worship, but also participating, and how particularly we might be able to develop strategies which made people feel comfortable about the Bible. Okay. So in different ways, Joe, my colleague, and I do quite a lot of workshops, more now than ever before, just about how you engage with the biblical text, and do that as a lay person, not as a kind of surrogate academic.
Okay. And what are the, over the years that you've been involved in this work, as you've engaged with lay people, with congregations, with folks inside and outside the church, can you say a bit about the ways that you engage with the Bible and the ways that people are receptive to engaging with the Bible? What works with lay folk in your experience?
Well, I think the key thing for me is it all started when I realised in an engagement for 2 years that a colleague called Mary and I had in the south of Glasgow, that people were scared to talk about the Bible, particularly Protestants. I love doing the Bible with Roman Catholics because it's a new book for them to some extent since the Second Vatican Council. Yeah. But Protestants have a right answers mentality. And therefore there's a fear of making any suggestion in case the ordained person says, well, that's not correct. And, we've suffered from this right answers mentality. People saying from the pulpit, this is exactly what the scripture means. Now, I believe that the scripture is profound. And anything which is profound has a lot of hidden depths. And if you believe that the Bible can only be comprehended via the conduit of the intellect, it's a very small God. It's a God who has no time for people of limited intelligence, no time for people who can't understand Greek and Hebrew, etc., etc. So for us, one of the kind of key things is in engaging people with the scripture, rather than ask people to respond to questions which depend on intelligence or on a right or wrong answer. The more important thing is to ask people questions which evoke wonder, curiosity, and which draw on experience. I mean, if I take just one example, I've done over the last maybe 4 or 5 years quite a lot of reflection on the miracles. And the miracles, people don't touch the miracles because they're a bit kind of spooky. We can't be sure of them, This is a pre-scientific age. And then you just begin, either with, say, 12-year-old girls and a group of people, all of whom are over 70, to look at the story of Jairus' daughter. And when people know that what we're looking for is not the right answer, but where that resonates in people's experience, you find with a 90-year-old woman, well, but she wouldn't be 90, she'd be 80-year-old woman, 90 now, but 80-year-old woman, she was a medical missionary, and she had been in a place where a girl aged 12 had died. And she brought her back to life when she discovered that the girl had, I forget the name of it, a self-induced coma, because she started menstruating that morning in a community where blood loss was taboo. Talk about the same miracle, or allow people to talk about it who are 12-year-old girls, and you discover a girl saying, when asked, why do you think that Jesus told her mum and dad just to give her something to eat, and then that was it? And this girl says, because he wouldn't want her to be a celebrity. Known forever because of one incident in her life. Now, these are the things which I just love, because these are not depths or insights which I would have from any academic learning or any study of scripture.
Sure.
And it indicates that when we appeal to experience, intuition, imagination, we find things. And we have to do that because the parables, the Psalms, the prophets are gifts to the imagination.
Sure.
They're not pieces of history.
And that all comes from your realization over the years that the question about how the scripture resonates with us takes us into this realm of experience, which is accessible to everybody, rather than confining it to the literalist, academic, theoretical approach to scripture. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the Psalms, John, and I was mentioning to you earlier that yesterday evening I was in a Bible study group with over 90 people looking at the Psalms, and we were today's the 7th of January. Last evening we were watching simultaneously live streaming news feeds from CNN and the BBC about what was happening on Capitol Hill. It reminded me of Karl Barth saying that, if you read the Bible, have the newspaper in the other hand, would he be looking at his Bible app with CNN live streaming at the same time? Who knows what Karl Barth would be doing? But what can you say to us right now about reading the signs of the times through the lens of scripture? Here now in January 2021, how do we read the Bible in a way that makes sense of our world and guides us forward?
Well, I don't think there's one way, because when we're looking at the Bible, we're dealing with a whole lot of different kind of literatures. History is not the same as wisdom in the Proverbs, not the same as poetry in the Psalms, not the same as a letter that St. Paul might write. But one of the things which I think is consistent is that people have been here before.
Okay.
That every human experience is unique, but also people have been here before. And sometimes we find words, say in the prophets, which are declaratory about the significance which God gives to social justice. Something which I didn't hear much in my childhood. That personal commitment sees its concomitant, if it's genuine commitment, in working for social justice. And the experience of Micah and Amos and Isaiah and Jeremiah, they're there to feed that desire for a more just world, and to some extent to give us a vocabulary. And the Psalms similarly do the same kind of thing. I've got here part of Psalm 52, which a colleague of mine, Doug Gay, and I kind of worked on for an American publication. Now, when you hear this, I'm just going to read one verse. You'd think this is a political tract. You cunning liar, why publicize your evil need to harm the good? Your slanderous tongue is razor sharp, honed to fulfill malicious plans. You love the lie and hate the truth. Now that's Psalm 52. In my Bible against that is the name Donald Trump. I put next to the Psalms people who come to mind for good or ill. And if people feel really aggrieved at a dictator or somebody who is malevolent, and feel that they, from their resource of language or piety, can't really complain to God on their own, then these Psalms give us a vocabulary to allow us to express what we might be hesitant, because Jesus used all these Psalms. He wasn't selective. He didn't just go for Psalm 23, Psalm 121. And so I think that when whether it's great delight or whether it's environment or whether it's a dictatorial regime or whatever, here we have a vocabulary we can draw on.
And the whole gamut of emotions and feelings are in there. John, thanks for that. There's so much more to dig into there. I guess my final question would be back to where this whole journey began, is through the lens of the Iona community then, and having been involved in the Iona community for so many decades of your own life. What would you say? I mean, it's maybe the same kind of question. There's no one way of reading scripture. There's no Iona community way of looking at the Bible or engaging with it. But what would you say is the impetus that the Iona community brings to looking at scripture today?
Well, it's 4 decades, Ruth, because you're curious
4.
about it. 4 decades. I joined the community not because of its social justice concern, but because I realized that I can be an individualist, and that nobody in my life would ever ask me to be accountable for my expression of faith, for how I deal with my money, and how I deal with my devotional life. That's why I joined.
Okay.
I thought I have to be held accountable for this. I mean, I was reading the Bible,
Okay.
but I felt this is a serious commitment, and I suppose because from the beginning, in my initial engagement with the community was when I was doing youth work. Because from the beginning, I perceived that this seemed to me to be the only group of people who took the Bible, or would be willing to take the Bible seriously, and to ally its message to the life of the world.
Sure.
That kind of compelled me to develop a friendship with the Bible. Now, I didn't have a friendship. I had a kind of relationship, a formal relationship with Scripture. I'd promised when I was 12 that I'd read the Bible every day. And I had never really become friends with the Scripture. I never felt I could argue against it. I never felt I could let it encroach into the way in which I thought or voted or behaved to some extent. And for me, I suppose, being asked and being challenged about my devotional life, and having seen other people who were prepared to put together, make connections between Scripture and lived life. That's just been a great blessing.
Yeah, wonderful. And so it's a whole package of the accountability, not just for how we engage with Scripture, but about how we spend our money, about how we do what we do with our time. That whole package was what drew you in. And
Yeah.
I love the idea of a 12-year-old promising to read the Bible every day. That's beautiful. And
it was traumatic at the time.
goodness, I
No,
can't
it's too long to tell the story, but it made a mark my life. I thought, if I don't read the Bible every day, my granny will die.
Oh my goodness, that's deep.
Yeah, that's what it was like.
John, listen, thank you so much. Thank you very much. That's fantastic.